Oh, okay, here we are.
There we are.
The switch was a little slow tonight. Well, good evening and welcome to About the Valley. My guest this week is Tracy Lovvorn. Tracy is running for it's the 2nd Congressional District.
2nd Congressional District.
Used to be the 3rd.
Yeah, it used to go Worcester down to Fall River, but now it's Worcester out to Northampton, Greenfield.
Well, it's also
Orange,
because we
Athol.
keep losing population in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens now with the 2020 census.
I think we're going to lose another seat.
We'll see.
They're trying hard not to, but I don't know how they're going to pull it off.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Actually, people are moving into New Hampshire. They may pick up a seat and we'll lose a seat. So that's a very strong possibility.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, if they redesign the districts, it's a little
better. A lot
better.
of Mass people have moved to Florida.
Yeah. Well, it's like California people are moving over to, Texas so
Yeah.
much. But then they vote the same way, and then
Yeah,
they ruin
don't
the
bring
new
your
state.
politics when you're going to ruin that place. Oh, my God. In some cases. But anyway, this is your 2nd time running.
Here we go. Yeah, it's and what a different time it is, right? With the coronavirus and such a different way to run a campaign. You don't have the events, you don't have the parades, the fairs.
Nothing's going on.
So how do you get out there and touch people and meet them? And even going door to door is kind of an issue because people don't want strangers just coming up. And
yeah, they don't. And if you do go, you got to wear a mask.
Right.
And I'm in sales. I don't like going to meet people doing cold calls with a mask.
It's a different world, and everybody's kind of struggling with it. At least that's a little equal. It's not equal when you talk about financially because we don't have the $1 million campaign. The treasure chest to be able to do commercials and mass mailings and that kind of stuff. So we're really relying on people to reach out to the campaign, do the research, go to our website. TracyForCongress.com. Follow us on Facebook, Tracy Lovvorn for Congress, on Twitter, anything just to get our name out there so that people can do a little research and hopefully take the responsibility to follow up.
The one good thing is the internet. If you didn't have the internet, it'd be even tougher.
Yeah, I don't, I hear stories about how they did things before, and the internet's good, the internet's bad, they still throttle things, it's still difficult to manage, but at least it's something.
Right, well, you can get your word out there, you can get some recognition on it.
Right, but not everybody's on social media and stuff, so it's definitely a different environment, and now with early voting, not just early voting, but the mail-in ballots. I think, what is it? People can start voting, is it October 22nd, I believe, something like that.
Well, we're late compared to some states.
Yeah, I heard North Carolina has already sent out their ballots, which is so just incredible what's happening.
The presidential debate is on the 29th, and they've already started mailing.
Yeah. Right, and so for for any campaign, the whole campaign was to get out the vote and to make the last-minute phone calls, but now it's, the 6-week process.
Yeah.
And in Massachusetts, with such a late primary,
That's
it's really
primary was
not,
very late.
it's really disadvantageous to the, to anybody, but, the incumbent takes so much power with that when you're not well known and you're trying to organize and so yeah, it's definitely a different animal to try to manage this go around.
And you're also a Republican in a Democratic state.
This is true, but you know what? This state and especially this district are very pink.
Central Mass is changing.
Yeah.
Central Mass is getting much. I think the most Republicans elected are in Central Mass.
They really are. We have Senator Fatman, we have Senator Dean Tran, we have Sheriff Liu, we have Dave Meradian, we have so many, Mike Soder. So we're definitely more a conservative area, and I like to think I'm really hoping that our conservative Democrats, our true JFK ask what you can do for your country Democrats wake up and realize that, our district isn't changing that party is changing.
Oh,
Their
dramatically.
party is changing so far that, you know what, I'm
Dramatically.
convinced that JFK would be an alt-right extremist in this day and
He
age.
would. He would.
And that's who I'm hoping that sees the opportunity to make some changes and to just preserve our country, honestly.
I mean, it should be called the Democratic Socialist Party.
It's a full-on Marxist movement.
It is.
You know, a lot of what's happening right now. You know, Nancy Pelosi today at least acknowledged that, hey, you know, looting is bad, burning businesses is bad.
Yeah, but she wasn't saying that.
It's too much. It's too little, too
month
late.
ago.
It's too little, too late. They've been calling for the burning. You know, our own Maura Healey, our Attorney General, said, yeah, America's burning, but you know what? Let it burn, because then a new forest can grow.
Yeah.
You know, and now we giggle, but that's seriously what's happening. You know, when you look out, I have a lot of family and friends out on the West Coast, and those fires, they end at the Canadian border, they end at the Mexican border.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell me that climate change
How
only
come it's not
happens in the
affecting-
United
yeah,
States?
Why isn't it affecting them?
Right.
They don't have the problem in Europe.
No, and you know, I'm not saying that it's not dry, but yeah, how does it end at Canada? How does it end in Mexico? These fires are being set, and it is disgusting
Not only
that this
that,
is happening.
We used to clean the forest.
Right.
They don't do it anymore.
Yeah, controlled burns.
They're still doing it in Canada.
And honestly, with the climate changing, you would have to do that even more.
Right.
It's like building up the seawall. If our climate is changing and we know that sea level is going to rise, you better build up the seawall. If we're having more droughts, you better take care of the forest even more. You know, and this happened the same thing a few years ago. You know, it's cyclical. We all know it's going to happen. So do something about it.
Well, you do like Joe Biden. You talk about it and then get on a private plane.
Right. Oh my goodness. So yeah, there's obviously a lot happening this election. I thought a lot was happening the election before, but what's happening, you know, every day there's something new, and it's overwhelming, and you know, I think the people that have been in office, you know, everybody looks at the presidency. I don't care who the president is. The max they can be in office is 8 years.
Right.
Total. Half the people hated Clinton, half the people hated Bush, half the people hated Obama, half the people hate Trump. They're only there 8 years. It's these people that have been in office 20, 30, 40 years that
Yes.
we need to hold accountable and say, look, you are
And
broken,
not what it was
and
meant
let's
to
fix
be.
them.
It was meant that you served for a few years and then went back and lived in society with the people you served.
Right. These long-term career politicians, they think in billions and trillions. You know, the rest of us in the real world are thinking in maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, if we're lucky. There's no relationship. You know, our current congressman, he's lived in D.C. for decades. His kids went to private D.C. schools.
Yep.
He doesn't know about our schools in Worcester, our schools in Grafton, our schools in Northbridge.
Never dealt with it.
He has no idea. And so I hear this a lot, like he's a good old boy from Worcester. I'm like, well, yeah, but he hasn't lived in Worcester since he was a teenager.
Right.
He's been in D.C.
Yeah.
the entire time.
Yeah, he worked as an aide. And,
Remotely.
Yeah, so he
Right out of college.
That's been his own place.
And he's never had a real job. And you know what? I can speak to this. With the coronavirus, I have my small little physical therapy clinic there in Grafton. We had to close. We were closed for, you know, the whole time until mid-July. And I'm currently reopening a business while I'm running a campaign. It's a new start
See, that's
business.
another thing,
It's a
is
lot to juggle.
as a
But I
small-
can do it because I
as-
know what I'm doing.
You know, as a small business owner, you know what it's like to try to bring the money in to keep the business going. They don't know that. They can talk and try. We'll just print more money.
Right. They have no idea. And printing more money, we are currently sitting in $26 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
That's over $70,000 per person in the United States. That's current.
Yeah.
That's before they want to spend all this money on the HEROES Act and health care for everybody and you know, free college for all. We're already at $26 trillion in debt. And we keep hearing how we're the richest country in the world. Well, how can you be the richest country in the world and be $26 trillion in debt? It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And again, we keep electing these same people, both parties. I don't care whichever party, but when Congress is so broken, it makes the other two branches of government that much more dysfunctional. I mean, think about it. With Congress not being able to do anything, they can't work together. It's just a major dysfunctional logjam. It forces, President Obama begged Congress to pass a bill for immigration because he was struggling so much on the border. He said,
Yep.
Congress, do your job, pass a bill. They couldn't do it. For
No.
President Obama, they couldn't do it.
And his party held the Congress.
It was ridiculous. So what happens, he had to do an executive order.
Yes.
He passes DACA and all that. He knew at the time he didn't think it was constitutional.
Right.
I don't like what he did, but I completely understand that he had to. Somebody had to do something because Congress absolutely cannot.
Well, you
And
had always illegals here.
he had to do something.
Yeah.
And he did something. And now our current president has to do the same thing. Executive order that may or may not be constitutional, but if he doesn't, absolutely nothing will get done because of Congress. And what that does to the third branch of government, if you look over at the Supreme Court, that's supposed to be an apolitical branch of government. And it's become so politicized because, again, Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives are so dysfunctional and broken that it's messing with the other two branches. We need term limits so badly. And people say, well, voting is, if you keep getting elected, you don't need term limits. But the incumbent is it's such a stronghold with the money,
Well, it's
with
not just
opportunities, with communication, with time on the newspaper, radio. It's so hard to run against these incumbents. They have a lot of power.
Right.
They shouldn't. They don't have power. We have the power.
They rule by polls. They find out which way is the wind blowing. Okay, that's how I'm going to vote.
Well, that's how I'm going to vote, but it's also which way the money's blowing,
Right.
which lobbyist is paying you.
Right.
What PAC money is giving you, what union is endorsing you, what pharmaceutical
But if they didn't have
company
to
is
run for re-election, if they knew they were term limited, they would be able to change their vote. They would probably vote more in what they know deep in their heart is the right to go.
Well, because they would be impacted by the laws that they're actually passing.
Right.
Right now, they're above our laws. They have
Well,
their own health care. They have their own.
They don't have to obey them.
They don't have to obey them. They get their own health care. They have their own retirement.
Yep.
They're living high on the hog, and it's not the way, like you said, it was supposed to be a sacrifice to do this job. And that is obviously not where we're at anymore. And I just wish people would look at that. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like our current president. I wish they would understand that there was a lot of people that didn't like our previous one. 8 years. Anybody can do anything for 8 years. But these 20, 30, 40-year incumbents are really gotten our country to where we are today, which is in a very bad place.
Yes. Yes. And very rarely do you see any of them that once they get elected only stay for a couple of years.
No, and you know what? They don't have to because it's not a law, but it wasn't a law for George Washington.
No.
He knew it was what was best for this nation.
He set a trend that lasted up until Roosevelt.
And that was a trend. And if these people had any worth to them at all, any honor, any love of this country, they would know that term limits are necessary. And they're not, because they're not going to cut off their own head. They're extremely selfish, and they're doing it. Our current congressman aligns his vote. Last election, it was 95% with Nancy Pelosi. This election, the last 2 years, it's been 99%.
Oh.
It's party, party, party. He's the House Rules Committee chair, and he promised us, last election, he promised us to be more bipartisan, to work together, to speak to our better angels. This man, there has been 0 open rules. and he has allowed the least amount of minority party amendments ever in the history of the House of Representatives. We're in the 116th House, and they wonder why all these bills go over to the Senate and Mitch McConnell sits on them. It's because not one of them is a bipartisan bill.
Right. There's no input from the minorities.
And that's all on the House Rules Committee chair to allow those discussions, to allow those amendments, and you guys can look this up. He has had 0 open bills and the least amount of allowed amendments by the Republican Party ever in the House of Representatives.
Well, but how did he get there? Because he told Nancy Pelosi, I'll carry the water for you.
He's doing exactly what he's being told,
Yep.
and that's getting us into the trouble we're at right now, because it's these two extreme parties that are doing nothing for our country, that are doing nothing for us but tearing it apart. We need to get rid of this extreme partisan stuff and just get down there and get to work, and that's hopefully what we could talk about next is, you know what, if I'm elected, what am I going to do when I get down there?
Right. It's, well, she'll be a freshman and she's not going to have any power. Well, that's not true.
Well, that wasn't true for AOC and Ayanna Presley.
Right.
And
you have a vote. And if you're vocal enough.
Well, I tell you what, too, especially when it comes to working with an administration. Oh, gosh. This might be a little bit of a tangent, but I'm going to go into the coronavirus response. Because in Worcester County, 75% of our coronavirus deaths happened in skilled nursing facilities.
Oh, I know.
75%. Now, my history, my work, I worked over 20 years in skilled nursing. And the first coronavirus deaths in this country on the West Coast happened in Washington State. It happened at a life care center.
Yes.
30 residents died. And this was back in February. We knew that this virus was going to impact the elderly who were compromised medically. We knew that was the primary target. Now, there was a skilled nursing facility out at the Cape that knew that information. I saw her being interviewed. I don't remember the name of the facility or her, but this administrator did an amazing job. She saw what was happening in February out in Washington, and she did her job. She did what she knew she needed to do. She ordered equipment. She talked to her staff, knowing that in skilled nursing, staffing is a primary issue, and a lot of staff go from facility to facility. She talked to them and locked that down and said, no, if you're working here, you're only working here. You can't go everywhere.
Right.
She told her families to stay home. She isolated different rooms. She did not have one death in her facility because she knew what she was doing. We could have saved thousands of lives in Massachusetts if we would have taken even half the measures that that particular administrator did. And we know to do this, our skilled nursing facilities are monitored by a state survey process. The state implements a survey, the federal survey, the state polices these communities and has on record what their problems are for the last few years. So we have the information available to us at the state level, who has problem with their employment, their staffing, who has had historical problems with their hygiene, with making sure that their practices are in place, their infection control systems are all in place. We know who's had problems historically. If I was your representative and I put this on Jim McGovern's plate, he needed to reach out to Charlie Baker and say, Charlie, what do you need? He's our bridge to the federal government. He could have went to the Department of Health and Human Services, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. He could have gotten the help and assistance that our governor needed to be able to come in, look at those state surveys, and get the help, the resources, all the resources from the federal government to help us in our skilled nursing facilities, and he didn't. Instead, all he did was push against this. He fights against President Trump, fights against this administration, does not work with them at all, and it has cost thousands of lives here in Massachusetts.
Well, you've seen that happen all over. It happened in New York. The people
But
died and they turned around and blamed Trump.
Right, and it wasn't all over. You can look at other states that did. Florida did extremely well with
Yeah.
all the people, with all the retirees that live in Florida. They did well.
Yeah.
Other states knew what they were doing. They got help from the federal government where they needed
they
it, and it
reopened.
worked. And they reopened, and they did not have the amount of deaths. Now, as a state, we're sitting at about 62 to 64%. But in Worcester County, 75% of our deaths were in the skilled nursing. And one of the reasons why I'm bringing that up is that come fall, the flu is going to hit again. This virus will most likely come back again. What are we doing right now to prepare for that in our facilities? Our current congressman is continuing to resist and fight this administration. He should be working with this administration, getting the tools that we need to protect us, to protect our most frail people in our whole,
Instead, they
in
just
our
call
county.
names.
Instead, yeah, they point fingers, call names, push back. I believe he said, oh, to get PPE, it's like the Hunger Games. Well, you know what? Quit talking like that. That I could have helped. You know, Jim McGovern, reach out to me. I've worked in these facilities for 20 years. I could have told you guys how to help. It wouldn't have been perfect, but you do the best you can. And like I said, other states did a good job. We did not do a good job. We needed help. Our governor needed help. Our facilities needed help. And we had enough help. Doctors and nurses and hospitals were on furlough, because so many outpatient clinics and centers were closed down. So there were plenty of doctors and nurses that could have helped. National Guard was on call. They could have helped. We had the DCU center that was set up and could have helped. If somebody would have just bridged the gap between resources at the federal government and at the state level, we could have saved thousands of lives. And that's where we're at right now, looking into the fall. We need to be preparing for the fall right now so that it's not as bad as what we just experienced last spring. And I'm not hearing those conversations take place. And that, more than a conversation, is action. And that's what should be happening right now. And I do put that on his back. He's our liaison to the federal government, and he did not get us the resources we needed. Whether he knew it or not, he had the ability to reach out to experts, again, at the federal government, Department of Health and Human Services, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They could have been here helping, working with us, instead of just watching thousands of lives get taken from us. And obviously I get passionate about this because I'm angry. It's sickening to me that this happened.
Yeah. Now, another issue that's coming up too is the funding police.
That is just...
You were at the rally.
Yes, I try to go to as many as those as I can because I know our police officers,
But, you know,
and
I
they
don't hear
work
any-
hard.
I don't hear any support coming out of our congressional people about supporting the police.
Oh, none. Zero. Absolutely none. You know, it's all about defunding, taking away
Yeah.
equipment. Law and order, you know, you need a moral and just society maintained with law and order. That's what gives us freedom.
Right.
And without any one of those pieces, we are no longer the country, the exceptional country that we are. And people get offended sometimes when I say, yes, our country is an exceptional place. It's exceptional because nothing like our country had ever existed on the face of this planet before, to where we had
Right.
freedom from the people up. We always had the tyranny from the government or the king down. This is
Right.
the first place ever on this planet that worked the way we have, and we're taking it for granted. We're giving it away. We're losing our rights and freedoms, and when those are gone, they don't come back, and there's no place else to go.
Yeah, we're fortunate we haven't had a situation yet, but who's to say what could happen?
It's happening already, you know, little by little. It has been for a
I
long
mean, it's
time.
breaking out in places where you'd never expected it, like a town in Wisconsin.
Oh, it's absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's awful, and
I mean,
that's
if
what
we
it's
have an
coming down
incident
to.
here, and who's to say it wouldn't break out? It could break out right here in Worcester County if you have an incident in one of the towns or in the city.
Well, you know what? To give Worcester City credit, they got a lot of pressure to defund their police, and they did not give in to the knee-jerk reaction, and they said no.
Right.
Because quite frankly, their police they're good. You know, Boston and Worcester, they have learned and they've grown and they've changed and they've modified in their community outreach. And I don't think there's an instance where any of our local police departments haven't readily sat down at the table to make any change or take any advice. And they always have done that. And so to punish them for something that happened in Wisconsin, that was ridiculous. And it wasn't right, it wasn't fair. And no, not one of our congressional members stood up for our police and said, look, no, our guys and women and men and women in blue are doing a good job. And you know, if there's something we can do better, let's listen.
Right.
Well, bring it to the table. Let's make it better, but don't just go out there, you know, that ACAB, you know, all cops are bastards. That's the most ridiculous statement ever, and that was unnecessary, and it was hard to watch, and it simmered down a little bit, but you know, quite frankly, it should have never happened in the first place. You know, they have our backs, we need to have their backs, and that's just the way law and order works, you know, moving forward.
Now, you've been in the health field for a long time, so you know, and now you've got your own business where you have to take insurance. What about healthcare? Are we going to ever get this resolved?
You know what? Not with our current members in Congress.
Right.
You know, they've been talking about Obamacare and changing healthcare. First, it was Hillary, right? Hillary tried to change healthcare.
Yes.
And then Obamacare. And honestly, the more the federal government gets involved with things, the worse it gets.
I was going to say, do you think we need to go to a government pays all, a single payer system?
You know what? Absolutely not. But I do think that there's some changes that should be made. You know, this was a great idea, and I'm just going to float it out there because I had a wonderful conversation once with a gentleman, and he had this idea of just saying, look, what about, you know how the FDIC insurance works for banks?
Yes.
Because there's a lot of good people in our country that work hard, that have insurance, and you know, they get something catastrophic happens, and they max out their insurance, you know, so they're being treated for cancer, leukemia, something very expensive and major, and once you reach those insurance maxes, they're losing their houses, they're bankrupt.
Right.
That should never happen in the United States of America, never. And so the idea is to come up with a program with catastrophic insurance that may be supplied by the federal government. That is not a bad idea, because then that would take the catastrophic incidences off of the private insurance. That would lower the fees for the private insurance.
Right.
And it would take away that fear of losing your house and going bankrupt because you're treating cancer. It's kind of a win-win. And when I had that conversation, I've never heard anybody talk about that before, and I would love to do some studies on that.
That makes sense.
It totally makes sense, because we don't all experience a catastrophic problem, but when we do, and we're doing everything the quote-unquote right way, you've been working hard, you have insurance, you're doing everything right, you shouldn't lose your shirt because you're just trying to save you or your family member's life. That's something we should talk about. I think that would win for all around, because again, that one move would automatically lower healthcare prices.
Right.
And I don't like the idea that our jobs are required to pay us healthcare, because then we're limited to whatever healthcare our job is providing for us.
And you could probably fund it with a small tax. Like Medicare is not that big a tax.
No, I think there's so many ways to fund a catastrophic healthcare coverage that
And
is on the government.
Could you incorporate into that people that have pre-existing situations?
I think most definitely. I think there's a problem with pre-existing conditions that, the way I understand it, is if you've had health care all along and you change health care, then yes, you definitely, a pre-existing condition definitely needs to be covered, no doubt. I think the problem comes is when you were young and you didn't have insurance ever,
Right.
and then you get diagnosed.
Well, that's
And
under
then you look.
Obamacare. That's what was set up.
Yeah, that's a little different, and I think that needs to be talked about and looked at. That's like buying house insurance after your house is on fire.
Right, but that's the way
You can't do
Obamacare was
that.
set up. You didn't have, it was mandatory to have it, but you didn't have it, you'd pay a fine.
Right, which, yeah, the
So-
constitutionality of
Which
that
was
is
cheaper than
questioned.
buying insurance. So now nobody, the younger people didn't buy it. Then, like you said, when they got older and they, oh my God, I got sick. I'm gonna go out and have,
Right.
and they're mandating that the insurance companies have to take them.
It's definitely a convoluted problem, but I think I at least come from it with a lot of experience in healthcare and a lot of experience with insurance, so I can have these conversations, and I've worked with people on the ground. I've worked with people that have struggled with this, and I at least bring some solutions to the table or ideas rather than just
I don't wanna see
pointing
mandatory
finger.
anything. I think the government shouldn't mandate anything. And that's what made this country great, was the
Right.
government didn't mandate anything, and we took care of it ourselves.
Well, and that's a whole nother conversation as well, but definitely, but we used to take better care of each other.
Right,
There is nothing that says that we can't help, that private industry can't help, that churches can't help, that communities can't help.
Well,
That
medicine's
we need
got-
to rely on each other. We don't need to be relying on our government.
medical coverage has got expensive because we have a lot more ways of treating, and they're costly. If you go back, 50 years ago, you didn't have CAT scans and,
But a lot of that can be
MRIs
looked at too, because you can't qualify to get an MRI until you have an X-ray. Well, that's just a waste, because you don't need an
these are the things
X-ray.
that we have to look at too.
So there's some clinical things that really need to be reevaluated
Right.
with how we progress,
Yeah.
So there is a lot to do with healthcare. I think I do bring a vast amount of knowledge to that, to at least be able to contribute to a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I have a solution, but I can contribute to one. And I think that's tremendously important and valuable. Another thing that I get a little upset about is working with an administration, whether it is a Trump administration or a Biden administration. We have to be able to work with these administrations. And right now, one of the biggest opportunities that we have is literally opportunities. We have 8 identified opportunity zones within our district. And this is working with Dr. Ben Carson and the
Yes.
Housing and Urban Development.
Those have been very successful.
They have. We have 8 of them already identified here in District 2. They're in Orange and Athol. There's an area in Leominster, here in Worcester, in Spencer, and down in Webster. They're already identified, which means all we need to do is, again, work with the administration instead of fighting all the time. Work with Dr. Carson, work with the communities, identify what opportunity can we use And these are monies, these are things already available to us at the federal government. Bring in the resources from the federal government to bring jobs, to bring industry,
Right, they
to
offer
bring
incentives for
trades.
industries to locate there.
Right, and so I have heard nothing but people say, well, the reason why, Worcester County is hit so hard is because all the mills closing, in the
Right.
60s, 70s, and how there's just nothing we can do about it. Well, that's not true. There is a lot we can do,
Right.
and we can use the force of the federal government's assistance. And Ben Carson has been traveling around highlighting success story after success story after success story. And this isn't new taxes or extra levies or anything that we have to pay. It's already a resource that's made available. But again, it takes a congressional member to do their job to actually represent us to the federal government so that we can go down and actually work together to solve a problem. It's driving me crazy because that's the same thing with the coronavirus. That's the same thing with these opportunity zones. There's so much opportunity, and that's pretty low-lying fruit. That's readily available. That's your job, that you're supposed to get down there and just help your citizens live better. and again, to know that those are already identified and they're just sitting there because our congressman absolutely refuses to work with this administration. Well, he's doing that out of his own pride, or I don't know what it is, but in the end, all it's doing is hurting us.
Right.
It's hurting us, and that is not what he's supposed to be doing in this elected role.
508-266-0990. Give Tracy a call. She's a congressional candidate for the 2nd Congressional District, which is basically Worcester County for the most part.
Right, but Franklin, Hamden,
But you
a
go
little
down
bit
to
of
Franklin.
Norfolk, because we
Yeah.
have one precinct there in Bellingham.
Yes.
So it's a vast district. We have about 60 towns
Yeah.
and communities. And again, those opportunity zones, Orange, Athol, Leominster, it's all around. It's not just Worcester and Worcester County.
No.
But speaking of Worcester, in last election in 2018, Worcester, the city itself, was on a list of the 20 most poverty-stricken cities in the country. That put it on a list with Detroit and Baltimore. 20% of our residents just in Worcester City, the second largest city in New England, make less than $15,000 a year. Now, that was before coronavirus. That was
Yep.
before everything has been closed and restaurants have had to close and businesses have closed. It's gotten nothing but worse. Worcester, look this one up. This is horrible. Number 5 in the nation for homeless students.
Oh,
Out of the whole country, Worcester is ranked number 5 for homeless students. Again, this
these
is
are-
before coronavirus.
we're not talking college students. We're talking students.
We're talking kids.
Kids, yeah. Kids in elementary and high school,
Yes.
middle school.
Number 5 in the whole entire country. Why are we continuing to do the same things the same way over and over and over
These
again?
are homeless families.
It's horrible. That's Worcester City. And if you figure that's the biggest city in our district, well, what does that mean for these other opportunity zones? What does that mean? What look like for Webster, for Orange, for Athol, for places up in Leominster? So much opportunity, and we've had the same people in charge, but especially our congressman now for 23 years. What resources has he actually brought to help? And now going into after this coronavirus, it's going to be worse than it's been.
Yeah. 'Cause a
And
lot of
if he
businesses aren't
hasn't been
coming
able,
back.
President Trump has been in office 3.5 years. Jim
Right.
McGovern has been in office 23.
Yes. How can you blame it on him? He's only been there 3.5 years.
Exactly. And so, our congressman has been in office for Democrat presidents. He's been in office for having the majority in the House, the minority in the House. He's been there through everything.
Right.
And we are still in this position. I'm just saying, you know what? I have a lot of good ideas. I have a lot of energy. I know how to get work done. And I'm giving us not just the opportunity, guys, but we have to do something differently or it's just going to stay the same.
I don't know if we ever got a call here?
I heard their phone ringing.
Yeah,
It
but
didn't
that,
seem
sometimes
like it.
they call and complain and hang up. No, we do have a call.
Uh-oh.
I didn't want to get going on another subject and. Go ahead, Carl, you're on.
Hello?
Hello, you're on.
Hello?
Yeah. We hear you, Barry.
Okay. Thanks for taking my call. And Tracy, I'm glad you're running for Congress. And I just want to say that here in Northbridge, like people, like you're saying, they're trying to realize what is the federal government doing to help us. Recently we've had to build a new school. We recently had to do a new fire station, and we've been told that there was no federal help for that, no federal grants, and it's just what is this is what people look to the federal government to try to give us some help, but we get nothing. And Harry can relate. It seems to me that the last major roads program in this country was under President Eisenhower. And, and you brought up a good point about nursing homes. To me, it's sad when Medicare only covers, I think, 30 to 90 days. And then you have to either go on, spend down your assets or go on mass health, while our own Congress people have long-term care insurance, and unless the person pays out of pocket for their own long-term care insurance, which is very expensive, unless you get it on a graduated income scale. But yet, since the end of World War II, it's like the United States has been taking care of the world. We rebuilt Europe. We've defended the Pacific perimeter since the end of World War II. Almost all North America benefits from a defense umbrella, but yet our infrastructure is being deteriorated in this country, and it seems like there's nothing really that the federal government is helping people. And our Social Security COLAs are based on a failed system where it doesn't take into consideration heat, fuel, health insurance, or some of the major costs. So people, especially seniors on fixed income, are getting, not a properly Social Security COLA because a lot of these things are taken out of the formula. Now, there is a senior coalition which has been trying for years to at least get a minimum 3% COLA for, Social Security recipients. But, there is a lot of things that, like I say, people look at the federal government and they say, where is it? It's like there's a lot of hot air coming from Washington, and I agree there should be term limits, but it seems like that's throwing sand against the tide. But just wanted to throw out some comments.
No, I agree with you. And, you guarantee a 3% COLA, but then you increase your tax 5%.
Right.
Plus your Medicare insurance goes up, so you're left with crumbs.
Right. And you know what? This goes back to term limits, but also just why is it that they have their own Cadillac health care?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't they qualify? I think they should qualify for mass health. And if they want something more than that, they should have to pay for it.
Or give Americans the same benefits they have.
Right. But again, we're $26 trillion in debt, so I'm not sure if that's is possible or not. But it would definitely make them understand reality if they lived in reality. And right now they just don't. They're above us, and it was never supposed to be that our Congress was above us. They were supposed to be below us. They were supposed to be a sacrifice.
You have private insurance with your employer, and and probably 99%, you pay a portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't they pay a portion of theirs?
Right.
Yeah, the whole thing is set up. It's not, again, I really think it comes down to these long-term career politicians having no idea of what reality is. You get in that beltway, and within 6-10 years, you have no idea anymore of what it's like to be a real person in real society.
Well, there's always been the rumor, if you want Social Security straightened out, put the Congress people on it. So, but that's
Yeah. For their
how
retirement.
people think.
Yes.
Definitely. I agree with you. And again, I don't have all the answers, but I at least understand the problems. Where it seems to me we have a lot of people in Congress right now, but especially our congressman, that just doesn't. He's full of hot air. He'll be at the wind at your back, no matter what you want. He'll be the wind at your back, but he doesn't follow through to actually get us anything. Again, these opportunity zones, I think, are just huge. That would be a tremendous
it's a great
impact.
thing.
The coronavirus coming up in the fall, what happened, in the spring is despicable. That is just horrific to think that thousands of people lost their lives because of pride. Because of pride, without working with an administration. And how can you get a grant for your town or for your cities if you're not working with the administration?
Right.
I know we got a couple
things. There's no federal money, and so the burden of the school and the fire station and other infrastructure things in the town all falls on the taxpayer. I mean, we did get some help from the MSBA on the school, but when we asked if there was any federal assistance, we were told that there was nothing that the federal government could do to help us on the school or the fire station. But it's amazing that, like they said, well, years ago there was grants for fire stations, but now all of a sudden they've all dried up. I mean, it's kind of weird how that happens,
Yeah, I don't. I'd have to look into more details. I know one of the big things that came out maybe a month or so ago. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and Jim McGovern came out and were saying that Massachusetts was kind of overlooked when it came to this food box program, working with our local farmers. Well, I tell you what, you can't just sit back and wait for something to happen.
Well, no,
you have to actively go out and
Yes.
make it happen. And so now they're both complaining about it. In the meantime, our farmers were left out of the dark on that. And
Right.
that's their fault. Their job was to know what's happening and to reach out and advocate for our needs.
Yes.
But all they know how to do is to complain about what they weren't able to get.
I mean, if they spent less time being partisan on things, and like you said, and working together, but it's just the nature of the beast.
It is, but shame on us for settling for that and to
Well, I know,
allowing it
but,
year after
people
year after year.
Keep voting the same people in.
And expecting different results. And you know what? I'm just trying to create a change. People are, you're a Republican in Massachusetts. Massachusetts, we keep voting the incumbent over and over again.
Well, that's it. We
Get what we pay for, guys.
Yeah,
And
you
I'm
get what
just
you vote
saying
for.
we could do a lot more. And I'm not talking parties. I'm talking about I don't care what party those people, the residents of the nursing homes were that died.
Right.
75% of our deaths in nursing homes, they were from all sorts of, some were Democrats, some were Republicans.
Yeah. Right.
Some of our farmers are Democrats, some of our farmers are Republicans.
Right, and now there's also a big comprehensive investigation on the Holyoke Soldiers Home.
Oh, yeah.
And what if there's been 80 deaths out there, Harry?
Even more.
Yes.
And I tell you what, again, go back to the surveys. If we would have, back in February, went to the survey books and found out, hey, how did Holyoke do in their previous surveys, we would have been able to identify potential problems before they happened and not looking at it as, penalizing them, but looking at it as, wow, they need help.
Right.
What
Well,
can
I
we
think
do
there's
to
a federal
help them?
investigation into that, Harry, and hopefully there'll be some after-action reports.
And you know what,
Yeah.
though? Back in March, the state gave them immunity.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So not just Holyoke, but every nursing home in this state got immunity. And I part of me understood that because you're dealing with a virus that is very deadly to specifically their population.
Right.
However, you see now especially that some of these administrators were phenomenal. They did an excellent job of managing. You can manage this virus, and that's what I'd speak to too. Is I've never seen anything in my life where instead of managing the problem, you manage the whole situation, like quarantining everybody. When you could have just protected the people that were most at risk.
And plus,
Right.
they seem to be coming out with new treatments every day.
Who does? I'm sorry.
They seem to be coming out with new treatments every day.
New treatments. There's all sorts of things. But at the same token, like I said, we knew it was going to hit the nursing homes. We knew that back in February.
Yes.
And nobody did anything in preparation. Well, our congressman didn't do anything to help prepare for that.
Well, that's unfortunately that's acceptable in this state for some reason.
For some reason, people think we did a great job.
I know.
I hear people say we did a great job. Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey make up about 10% of our country's population, and we make up over 40% of our total coronavirus
Yes.
deaths.
Right. And
We
a lot
could
of
have
them
done
were, like you said,
something
were all
better.
in the skilled nursing homes.
And a lot of that is proven to had been preventable.
Mm-hmm.
If we would have gotten the resources
And
we
you have
needed
states like
and done
Florida,
something.
which have a higher percentage of elderly
Right.
and didn't
Well,
have
look-
as big a problem.
Look at South Dakota. South Dakota never shut down, Harry.
Right.
And look at Sweden. Sweden never shut down.
No.
And but I mean, you bring up a good point about the qualified immunity. You hear that they gave the nursing homes or whatever qualified immunity, but now you got the governor wanting to take away qualified immunity for police officers.
Yeah.
So it's really a lot of double talk out there.
Well, no, they passed that bill, didn't they?
The
No,
House
that-
passed it, the Senate changed it.
Yesterday I got some information that he wants to know what's going on with it. He's kind of pushing it, and that's going to open up a lot more issues. I mean,
Well, the
if
state
Massachusetts wants to policing like Baltimore City or Chicago or Pittsburgh, I mean, you take away qualified immunity, it's going to have a hindrance on law enforcement in the state.
Yeah, they're going to be a lot more careful what they do, and the victims are the ones that are going to suffer.
Well, like I said, I mean, the politicians are not going to suffer. They have their own security.
Right. Exactly.
And the common folk that really need the police are going to be the ones that suffer.
All right. Hey, Barry, we got to be going.
Okay, I'll let you go. I was just going to
Thank you
sign
for
off.
calling.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and good luck, and stay safe and stay well.
Thank you, you too.
Okay. I want to give you a chance to sum up because we're getting close to the end here.
I know, it goes by so fast, but
It does.
that's just, one more thing that I think we can do immediately is immigration. Immigration is another one of those things. We haven't talked about it much this election season, but it was all the rage,
Right,
in
but
2018.
now it's down on lower on the
And so now
scale.
we have 2 more years that nothing has happened with immigration. And this is going back and forth, back and forth.
we got more of a wall.
Well, yeah,
And illegal immigration is down.
it's down a lot, but what
But
I'm
we
looking
still
at,
need
it's going to come
we
back.
need a system that allows people to come here that we need.
Well, the thing is in Massachusetts, we have over 100 colleges and universities.
Right.
So the number of student visas is huge.
Right.
We also have a lot of healthcare, a lot of sciences. So we have a lot of people here on H-1B work visas as well. I
Right.
think there's no reason why Massachusetts shouldn't take point on immigration reform. 40% of immigrants that are in our country illegally are here on expired visas.
I know, they come here on a student visa and stay.
But the people I know in that situation, they would become citizens. They want to.
If there was a system to
If
allow
there
it.
was a system to allow it, that was navigable, that was understandable, that didn't take $20,000 in 20 years and 2 or 3
Yeah.
different attorneys to help you figure it out. We need something that's moral and just and fair, that's not easy but attainable, and every other civilized nation on this planet
Well, we
has
always set things up to
something.
make the attorneys rich.
You know what? It's to make the attorneys rich. They don't want to fix this problem because it doesn't give them ammunition for the next election.
Right.
Again, they're putting people's lives in danger and in limbo, and they're taking advantage of people. And I'm saying I'm talking about long-term politicians that instead of getting work done for us, they don't want to solve these problems. This is a very solvable issue, a very solvable problem. And yes, now's the time to fix it before it becomes a problem again, because it will become a problem
You
again.
shouldn't need an attorney to become a citizen.
I bet you it's going to come a problem again, probably next election. Every interim election will be immigration, and every presidential election it will probably be, riots in the
it'll be
streets
on
and
there.
fires. It's just
It'd
ridiculous.
probably be up there right now, but COVID has put the damper on a lot of things.
Maybe. I just know that there's a lot of things that are extremely fixable, that don't take rocket science, that just take somebody to go there and make it happen instead of finding excuses and blaming other people for their inability to get work done.
Well, you hear complaints about manufacturing going overseas. Well, what's the Congress doing about it?
They're the ones that have allowed it.
Yeah.
By passing so many laws and rules and making it so expensive for businesses to stay
Yeah,
here,
and make
they're
it-
the ones that
They
caused
actually give them
China.
incentives to go overseas.
Right, so now we got China. We're reliant on China for our medications, for our PPE. We're
I
reliant
know.
on China for everything. And again, the root cause of that goes back to Congress.
There was a bill introduced to make all our prescriptions would have to be manufactured in this country. And Nancy Pelosi got it squashed.
She probably got paid some pretty good money from
Didn't get passed.
pharmaceutical companies. And that, again, they're putting their own interest above us. And that is 100% what is causing any disruption in our country right now, is long-term politicians that are putting their own interest ahead of us, and they have been doing so for decades.
Well, they get paid well to do it.
From us, we pay
Yeah.
them.
Well,
It's-
also the
it's-
lobbyists.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Money is the mother of politics because that's how they run every year. They need to raise as much money as they can.
Yeah, which I'm really needing help with. So,
Yeah.
good segue.
Yeah.
I need help still, guys. I'm trying to get information out there, signs
You can
out
go
there.
to your website.
Websites, TracyForCongress.com. Facebook, Tracy Lovvorn for Congress. Twitter is Tracy4 with the number 4 Congress. Reach out to me. Half the time I pick up the phone. I'm working right now. I'm making my clinic open and operational again so I can help people in my community. I'm getting on shows like this and going out on the weekends and trying to meet as many people as I can. With the coronavirus, though, it's definitely been more of a challenge. But again, if you need some information, please reach out and I'll answer your question. I will be as honest with you as possible. We might not always agree on everything, but you're going to get an honest answer, and I'm always going to have our best interest at heart.
Okay, Tracy's got a website. You can get a hold of her through that. You have a phone number?
It's on the website,
It's on the
contacts on the everything's
Okay.
on the phone. And you know what? Messenger on Facebook.
We gotta go.
is
We
wonderful.
gotta go. Thank you for looking
Thanks
in,
so
and
much.
best of luck.
Thank you.